Okay, so I'm here with Professor Randy Dible. He's a professor of philosophy, I think, in the state of New York. Correct
That's
me if
right.
I'm
Let me
wrong.
just let me just jump in there actually real quick
Okay.
because it's actually Bible, like
Oh,
the Bible.
Dible.
You don't call the Bible the Bibble, so don't call the Bible the Dibble.
Oh, the thing is that I was thinking about Flynn Dibble. I don't know if you know him.
No, I don't know what that
Uh,
is.
I made a video about him. He's like this archaeologist. He's a skeptic, and I saw your name is the same as his,
Yeah,
and I thought the pronunciation was the same. So I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
no, really, you're funny. Fine, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So I I'm with Professor. How do you say?
Yeah, Bible, like the Bible.
Dible.
Yeah.
Dible. Okay, Dible. He's a professor of philosophy. He contacted me after I published the video, the Epstein paradigm shift, and we talked a bit. We kind of have a similar philosophy, metaphysics. We have a similar system of ideas and so on. And I wanted to have a talk with him on this, and particularly like on the topic of what happens after we understand what God is, because uh, like in my research, I think that I found that there are two ways or two paths that you can take after that. So you have the more traditionalist view, which kind of coincides with the Eastern view of liberation, of moksha, of trying to being reintegrated in the absolute, in the principle of being, and like discarding the world of becoming because it's all relative, it's all unimportant from the perspective of the absolute. And then there's the other view, which is more like trying to grow with reality itself, with the reality of becoming. Is like more of embracing the process. And you can find this view more like in people like Rudolf Steiner, or I don't know, also Whitehead, for example, process theology, or Taylor de Chardin, or Harry Bergson, and so on. So this is like an important question. Like, where do you go from here? Like, and this is like the central topic of this video. And I'm just gonna leave Randy present himself now and talk a bit about his metaphysics, his philosophy, and so on. And then we will get into the central topic.
Yeah,
So you
cool.
have the floor.
All right. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. I really appreciate it. Um, yeah, I'm especially excited to share my philosophy because a couple years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, I had um, a really profound breakthrough personally, and that really brought everything that I've been doing to a head or to a no head, as I've been saying lately. Just this past like year or so, I've been in the past like 2 years been trying to find a way of integrating this radical breakthrough, and more recently, I'm just like completely immersed in what's called the Headless Way by Douglas Harding. It's Douglas Harding's philosophy, which is really a um, very practical, contemporary, uh, crowning glory of the Philosophia Perennis. But see
Mhm.
this, so I'm like still studying all of this, and I would love to represent Harding's view on the matter of that like debate between theosophy and anthroposophy regarding reincarnation
Okay.
and the other ways of articulating this matter. But but um but so on the one hand, like I'm like really focused on Douglas Harding, but um but where I'm coming from is what I've been integrating everything that I've done before that. So I'll just I guess I'll outline like where I'm coming from and what I have that's unique to contribute to this stuff, which I think is a very powerful like system or systemless system kind of a thing. So I'll just tell you that around 1999, around the millennium, actually, I was like 15 years old. I grew up in California, and we all like partied out there with psychedelics and stuff, on the beaches, on the bonfires and stuff, and I experimented with different things, and in different ways, I have been brought to like a kind of breakthrough level, kind of thing, and this manifested in different ways, but around that time, what crystallized was a perspective, and I jotted down some like symbols and the beginnings of like mapping out this vision, this perspective, and that's been really the core to this day, to absolutely to now. It's still very much my anchor points for this perspective. But in the intervening years, I've developed the material that connects these anchor points in really profound ways, and have pursued academic philosophy eventually, after 15 years old, right? And eventually I became trained in phenomenology. And so actually let me just be clear about my timeline. So I'm talking about stuff that happened when I was like 15, which remains constant to this day. But of course I grew, your theme, right? I grew so much, of course, in my like philosophical development, by going to school, by studying different things in the intervening years. And then in 2024, I had a really profound breakthrough. And that brought all of that stuff into alignment in a very powerful, clear way, so that the awakening of these, or the activation of these symbols, which hits on so many, multiple registers of energy, aligned in such a way that now I think this is a very, very important, fundamental, going forward, contribution to philosophy, to humanity, to culture, to architecture, to programming, to everything. And it's also a naive, simple perspective that is easily transmitted and shared at the same time. So it's also, it's both incredibly sophisticated, drawing on these really big picture thinkers like Rudolf Steiner, and René Guénon, but also really less well-known ones like Anna Teresa Timonetska, and then the more well-known continental philosophers like Paul Ricoeur and Edmund Husserl, and especially the one person who I'm really focusing on in my phenomenological specialization in recent years, in the past like 8 years or so, Hedwig Conrad Martius, who was an early student of Edmund Husserl, and her thing was the ontology of reality, the phenomenological ontology of reality, and this led her to what she calls universal ontology, and that universal ontology is the framework that I'm developing. The title of my dissertation enterprise, my project, for instance, is Universal Ontology of the Infinite Sphere. And this is a theory of absolutely everything. And what it ties this universal ontology onto are these anchor points that I referred to previously, right? These anchor points are the absolute infinite, absolute infinity, the infinitum absolutum, and what I call the infinitesimal point, which is simply the naively simple intuition of the geometrical point. It's just that this one is so unique. It is the only point that there is, and taking it seriously does require a kind of almost childishly naive open-mindedness and open-heartedness, that this Douglas Harding headless way is a really fantastic, really weirdly appropriate way in to this experience of these anchor points, of the infinitesimal point, which obviously you can picture this, right? This is something you can imagine as being an anchor point, right? The ultimate anchoring of everything. And in this case, of a system of becoming, of the transformation of elements and et cetera, really, of everything. And what it is it's ontological geometry, right? And this other anchor point is the absolute infinite, which is, okay, not really anything that you can picture, but of all the things that it could be, because it actually turns out it is everything, and therefore it's free to be absolutely anything and everything. What it is in this vision is relative to that point. It is the circumference or the periphery of an infinite sphere, and not just an infinite sphere, but of course, the sphere of the all, as it's called, ta panta sphyros, the sphirum infinitum, etc. Empedocles' sphere, philotes, the love, the sphere of love. So the system is has to do with these synonyms for these two anchor points. So just to get clear about this framing, this framework, and then the way they connect. That's the theory of extension, which I think bears tremendous ontological gravity to the ideas of hyperspace, of different dimensions, and how it's articulated in these different traditional systems of an etheric and an astral plane and all of that sort of stuff. But these anchor points, these two pillars, what they are best articulated. This is the sophisticated version, in terms of, on the one hand, a formal ontology, that of the infinitesimal point as the first distinction, and this draws heavily on the logic or proto-logic of George Spencer Brown's laws of form, which is just about drawing a distinction in an otherwise unmarked state. So he calls this the unmarked state, a very easy intuition to grasp by having, as you can see here, nothing at all, right? But then when a distinction is drawn in that, his formal ontological system is about two laws or two axioms or two ways of indicating there being a distinction in this unmarked state. And he calls this the first distinction. So this is what at age 15 I was getting into. And
can I intersect a bit? Does he explicitly say that distinction coincides with the point, or this is a connection that you made afterwards?
So this is a connection that I made immediately, and and I shared this with him. So he was a friendly dude. He put his phone number out on a website that his publisher put out and stuff like that in his books. And so I contacted him, when I was 15, and we became friends. And but so the way I went into that, the reason I found it so tremendously significant and still do is there's this guy John C. Lilly, and being like in that California world, Terence McKenna, the mushroom philosopher, that sort of thing, Timothy Leary, these were the kinds of things that first brought me to what's called philosophy. But then this other character, John C. Lilly, invented the flotation tank, and he was doing like first personal science of consciousness in the flotation tank. And he also has really, really curious connections with like government interests. People were very, he worked for NIM. He's explicit about covert operations that he was involved with. He's certainly a founding member of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI. They even called themselves the Order of the Golden Dolphin in the early days, because he's the human dolphin communications guy. And then he's infamous as like a mad scientist. He was doing LSD and ketamine in the flotation tank, and in that context developed this whole meta programming perspective So like here's his book, Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. So this is like an early version of stuff that's really popular these days, right? Like simulation, hypothesis, and all this stuff. But so the reason he was into this laws of form is he described it as a guidebook into other universes.
Okay.
And he organized a conference with Alan Watts at the Esalen Institute in 1972, and they brought Spencer Brown out to speak in front of. We have Gregory Bateson and Margaret Mead, who, by the way, met through the OSS, Central Intelligence Agency, kind of situation, right? And but of course, I mean, they're well known as figures in communications and semiotics and cultural anthropology. And Heinz von Forrester, a cybernetician of the Biological Computing Laboratory in Chicago, Urbana, Illinois, and et cetera. Like really, really fascinating figures there. So anyway, all the mics, all the eyes were on George Spencer Brown and his sharing laws of form with that group. And the really interesting thing that happened there, as far as like the dialogue goes, the content, is he reversed that view of Lily. He said, no, it's a way of coming back to this one. And the way I took that was that we are always going off in these other possible universes. I could choose to go right or left, right? I can choose to wear pink or blue, or, there's all these other possibilities, but here we are, right? So at the core of that simple illustration of present immediate experience of life is this formalizable abstraction of the nature of just indicating a distinction in an otherwise unmarked state of potentiality. Actualization occurs according to these laws of form. So it's about formation, but really it's about formation and foundation. Okay, so there are these like two pillars, right? And this is the first distinction of Spencer Brown. And to get around to it finally, I can respond to your question. Like, no, he didn't quite say that that's the infinitesimal point. He didn't say anything of that sort. What he did say when I brought it to him was that that my interpretation was that the first distinction was already implicitly pure self-reference. This is what I came to, like on my psychedelic journeys. I realized that like the frame within a frame within a frame kind of situation, of like thinking about thinking ad infinitum, right, is something that you can push all the way to a breaking point, right? And this point of pure self-referentiality is the implicit limit of all self-reference, which you can expand to include really absolutely everything, because in a sense, everything you could frame it this way, that it is itself. Like maybe it has ontological closure, or in any case, things are themselves, right? This is like the category of the same. And of course, the other side of this, if you're going to do that as a thought experiment, as an hypothesis, is that there's this category of the other, the heteros, the heteron kai heteron, the other and other, the thing that's so absolutely beyond that it can't even grasp itself, and precisely as Plato puts it, it's beyond being, right? And so it seems like what we have is pure self-reference is pure subjectivity, or this infinitesimal point. And the alternative, according to Spencer Brown, from his formal ontological vision, is nothing at all. And he does equate this with a kind of his own kind of perennial correlationism with das Nichts, with shunyata, with the nothing, the void, the Godhead, in his later books. So there's this, but early on, what I had figured out was, what really is this? Is this nothing? Like I agree that like the Buddhist context, like Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the Shunyata, is absolute nothingness. And we can have relative nothingness. But what this book is really about is about formation, or what, for instance, in Buddhism is called pratitya samutpada, or mutually interdependent co-arising of forms by their opposites, like an enantiodromia, which comes from
Yeah.
Heraclitus, and that Carl Jung, for instance, looks at in terms of psychic energy. But in any case, like, things come about in this nature, and that's the laws of form. But that's a formal ontological way of looking at this one ultimate principle of all principles. So that's like the center of this vision, is this one pillar. Okay, but then this other pillar is this, that the nothing is actually infinitely fast, exploding into absolutely everything, to cut to the chase. And what that is the absolute infinite, or this thing that's completely beyond comprehension. So you can't have it on a pillar, really. It's not something you can indicate. I mean, we can. I mean, I'm saying it, right?
Mhm.
And I can give it a symbol. Like, I have this symbol of the lemniscate, and I put two little absolute value signs on it to indicate that this is the absolute infinite. Whereas this infinitesimal point, it's unity in reference to infinity, or unity over infinity. And so it's really just like these two little lines are either on either side of the lemniscate infinity symbol, or like this. And there's like probably other cool ways of like messing with these lines, like put a bow on it, um, but and it's fun to, like, think of it in this playful manner, this architectonic spiel. But I think your questions, the theme of this talk really bears on that integument, right? The connections between what these things that I'm positing are. I'm just trying to get clear on, like, what these anchor points, for this system, like, are to start.
Yeah, you referenced the sphere, and I think that sphere is based on the monad. It's like a 3D version of it, right? Because
Right.
you have the point in the middle, and then you have the circumference, and you draw the same conclusions that I drew from the monad when, like, I questioned, like, why does the monad represent God? Like, why is this symbol so important, and why is it specifically represent God? And when I asked that question, like, I looked at the center of it, I looked at the point, and I realized it had zero dimension in Euclidean geometry, zero dimensions. And then I realized, well, this coincides with transcendence, because, well, transcendence is something that cannot be grasped. It's not, you cannot grasp it physically. And the point, having zero dimensions and also being the base for all the other elements, like a line is made of infinite points and so on. You cannot have the other geometric elements without the point. Uh, that, to me, like, told me, well, this is what God is actually, because uh, the point has the same qualities. And also I saw it as, like, in the perspective of time, like in a temporal view. And if you look at the monad, it actually has the same shape as a clock. It's a weird
Yeah.
synchronicity, let's say. And if you think about it, like, time is represented perfectly on the clock. You have the center, which is the present itself, and which is that point, and then you have the arms that indicate what time it is, which is like every moment that happens in time, every actualization of the present, and it's only the present which gives reality to that moment. So it's the center that gives reality to, uh, like, the hour that we are in. It's 9 p.m. here, so it's the center. It's the present, and the present has some weird qualities as well. Like you cannot grasp it. Like you can say, "Oh, when is now? It's now," but it's already past. Like you cannot grasp it in this, let's say, in any form. Actually, it's completely transcendent, but at the same time, it's the basis for everything. Like we are always in the present. There's no past. There's no future. There's only always the present. Like everything happens now, basically, but you cannot grasp it at the same time. So it's paradoxical, and it's the same thing as God to me. Like this is the realization that I had when I was looking at the monad and thought, why is this representing God? And from that moment on, I understood like the basis for every religion. Like I had the keys to understand what was referred when God was mentioned. I understood the I am that I am from the Bible. I understood also that consciousness is connected to that point. I understood that we have the same consciousness, it's that point, but we are like entities on the circumference of that sphere, and we are like limited. We are that universal consciousness, but we are contained within bodies, within certain specific boundaries, and so on. But at our core, we are that. And the purpose of spirituality, as I see it, is to realize this uh, essential truth and to be one, to be identified with that uh, core center of the monad. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I have to make what I think what you're setting up is first of all, like generally something that I agree with in spirit, but here's the big distinction, and I think this is a sophisticated point, perhaps, but I think that this is of tremendous significance, and I think this is really what activates the central intuition of the circumpunct symbol, or the alchemical symbol for the sun, or that monad symbol, and it's this, that center point is different from so first of all, the circumference, this periphery, is not merely like diminutive, like we flow around here. This is also happening, but that's the fourth, the like 3 and 4 dimensional, like the higher dimensional analog to something much deeper that's going on. So let me just jump to the center of that vision, if it's all right, and because I want to try to develop the picture, because I too have those feelings that there's something really powerful going on here, something of tremendous significance, and but what I've realized in recent years is this needs to become not just something that people that like on the one hand, like makes us feel good because it tells us about the truth about spirituality, and we see through the illusions of culture and physical matter or anything like that. Like that's good, but I think it does affect that. It works on that register, but there's something deeper going on, and it's this. So in my way of understanding, my vision here, that center point is not God, but everything is God in a way. So yeah, okay, it is. But what it is it's the distinction, the first distinction from that overwhelming overflowingness of the fullness, the overfullness of this cannot comprehend itself, absolute, infinite, ultimate reality. So the true God, which is nowhere more clear and direct and immediately present than right here at this center point, of which there is only one in the radically ontologically strict sense, including like the most positive solipsism and the most positive blasphemy of supreme metaphysical ontological identity with God. This is the inner story that only I have, or in other words, only you have, that completes the picture, that completes the story of everything that's becoming about the world and souls and spirits and etc. because it's this overwhelming overflowingness, this superabundance of the absolute infinite, which is ultimate reality, which is who you are, which is the answer to the question, who am I, or who are you, or who are you really, or who am I really, really, which coalesces with the question of what is reality, right? So ultimately, the ultimate register here is this other pillar. The nothing is exploding into absolutely everything infinitely fast in all possible ways, meaning not just like with God all things are possible, but all things are realized like right here. And the other versions of like this possible circumstance are there occluded by this one. And this is actually something that with a view of like where other possible universes lie in a dimensional frame of reference, we can get like a real clear vision of this. And so in my teaching, I always end up with like this eyeball diagram. I start by saying, I'm Professor Dible, I'm Randy, you can call me Professor Dible, I write Professor Dible, and then eventually, later in the semester, I write, Possessor to eyeball, and I explain to them, how indeed that's what you are, is just this circumpunct, or this monad, symbol, but the key thing is what it means. So there's ultimate reality, which is the absolute infinite, which is infinite love, infinite self-giving love, and that's truly what you are. And what that means, though, is so profound that I think it's necessary to have a reference experience, like a moment in one's maturation in growing, so that as the adult is to the child, the seer or the sage or the philosopher is to the adult. And this is something that we don't have in culture. Our bar is very low. I mean, the things that are happening in politics and in the global, the way we value things, value money and sex and experiences and everything, there's a place for this holy grail of the crowning wisdom that, as Heraclitus says, steers all things. And that's philosophy in a really deep sense that has like lost its spirit, So here's the spirit. So here's the spirit, and the spirit is the spirit of God. And what it is its penultimate reality. So we make a distinction between ultimate reality, which is God, which is right here, which is the super present, super abundantly self-evident or supra self-evident thing that's going on. This no thing that is absolutely everything. This absolute external reference experience is what I'm calling it lately, because it's just so beyond, right? And it's just the giving. It's the ontological giving of all life and being and reality, of truth, so that there can be things, but so that there can be even more things, glorious things, that is really what they are. So there's this ultimate reality, but there needs to be a distinction, and this is the organizing principle of all possible universes. This is the infinitesimal point, and this is taking it radically seriously, that there's only one of it. So I'm not saying that each and every person has this at their center. Like, yes, on a certain level, yes, I'm saying that, but at the same time, there's only one of this center of all possible centers, and it's your center, right? Like for me, it's my center. For you, it's your center. But the point is, 14 billion years of cosmic evolution or whatever has led to this cutting edge, and it's not an edge, it's the infinitesimal point. That's the framing for the infinite.
But doesn't this make it multiple? Like if it's I have mine, you have yours, then
I mean, look, there's points of reference absolutely everywhere, but this relationship between this center point and this utterly beyond of the circumference or the periphery, yes, it has in its wake multiplicity, and that's where all of these arrays of reference points that constitute entities in multiple dimensional continua, and at this layer, in this 3+1, in between the third dimension and the fourth dimension, where we find our experience, and with these arms and this world and everything, all of these things rest on the foundation of this thing. And what this is not like a point that can be represented. Like it can be indicated through this presentation, this illustration, the illustrative magic of this like sigil, right? But what it really means is that like point that you're meditating on at the center of the cosmic mandala, or if you use a yantra or light a candle, or the self repeating in time of the repetition of a mantra, all of these cosmic centering devices, these meditative aids, the meditator realizes that point, that bindu, is there's only one of it, and it's here. It's actually your like point of perspective. Like literally, they coincide. They are the same.
Like I would respond to that we are just a repetition of like the universal monad. So you have like one which is unique and is universal, and we are made in the image of God. So we are just repetition, a copy of that in
Yeah.
our expression. So like I would still put the point in the center of everything, and
Mhm.
then I would say that we as individuals have our own point. I have my own ego, I have my own personality, and this, I would say that this is the lower self actually.
Mhm.
And then I would say that the other one that I mentioned before is the higher self, which
Yeah.
coincides with God. Like Atman is
Mhm.
Brahman, like
Right.
in Vedanta. And I don't know. I wanted to ask you, because also before you said that the point is the first distinction.
Yeah.
But and then if you say that the point is not God, what
Right.
is God? God is everything. Is like, do you have like a pantheistic view of God, or is it
Yeah.
panentheistic?
Right.
Let
Right.
me
So
understand. Yeah.
yeah. So this is the crucial thing. Just like, and it's analogous to the question of like, the multiplicity of points of reference, and the lower individual self that I am. Also, I'm just this guy,
Hmm.
At the same time, um, where is that constitutive operation, that ultimate metacosmic, thing happening? Where is the whole shebang occurring? Like that cosmological singularity of like the Big Bang, but the biggest possible Big Bang, So where is that occurring? And my response to this is it's you could say, if you want to make the distinction between the image and the original, the paradigm, is it's occurring right here in this center, right? And so we do have an image, and we have an apparent mark, or a sign, or a manifestation, or a phenomenal appearance, a phenomenal universe appear in the midst of this cosmic, or rather, not cosmic, most primordial, like meta-cosmic, formation and foundation situation. And what that situation is the distinction between ultimate reality, which is God, which is infinite love, and penultimate reality, which is life, infinite life, you could say, because it's pure self-reference, pure subjectivity, occurring as the center of centers of all possible organizing, or all possible organizations or formations. And so where that's occurring is all in the same point. And so this singularity, like Jorge Luis Borges in his short story, The Aleph, has this vision of like a friend who falls when he's a kid in the basement, and sees this thing, and then he goes in the basement and he sees this thing as well, right? The Kabbalistic, the Aleph, right? This point of all light, and he described the whole poem, the whole short story is like, I saw this, and I saw this, I saw this, I saw this, right? The liturgical repetition of just absolutely everything.
Hmm.
But it's all like in this vision of this point, and that's what this visio beatifica, this blessed view, this great vision of the all, is at the center of the philosophia perennis. And here's my like big insight is combination of the philosophia perennis and the methesis universalis. And these things, there's creative poetic like license here because they have to be reconstructed. They're not well articulated enough in I think not sufficiently in Steiner and Guénon and any of the great synthesizers. So one has to like bring it together. But where I'm coming from are these anchor points. And so my view is this monad isn't God, but rather it's an example of what's happening. And what's happening is this distinction between the overwhelming overflowingness of God pouring God into God on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, the overwhelming overflowingness of God pouring God into God. So it's how could there be a distinction in all of that bliss beyond bliss, ecstasy beyond ecstasy? And so the answer is that there has to be this organizing principle of all possible universes, and this is the foundation of order. And in particular, the way of framing it isn't just like, I mean, we could jump to like universes and picture like, mythopoetic, cosmogonies. But I think the first dimension as the rays of light emanating from, and the return paths, right? The Proclean emanation and return of that monad is the first dimension. And you see, since it's happening in this, you invoked that the clock face has this sexagesimal curiosity of like, there being 360 degrees, and it's interesting, the particulars of the numbers and how they operate in particular in Yamblichian theurgy is where I go with this stuff lately. But in any case, the lines that connect the center point to the periphery of the infinite sphere, because it's an infinite sphere, have a really curious geometry that doesn't fit the Euclidean, you could say Euclidean, or maybe there's a more esoteric Euclidean that is better for this, but the received tradition of like a line is something external from me, like I could put it on a plane and it's like, the segment of the line, or if I put the arrows on each side, that's the line, right? No. It's the line that is aligned with this infinitesimal point, radiating, from here, returning from here. And on this is grafted then the other dimensions, and any kind of world like this one that I have here before me is billowing out from this alpha and omega point, the arche kai telos, the beginning and the end of everything in this pure self-reference of this infinitesimal point. And really what it is, I'll argue, the highest magic or the deepest magical point of how things actually come into being. And I don't invoke magic in any way to like contrast with rationality and science in all of its variegated manifestations, but rather to align it with the Mythesis Universalis, which I think George Spencer Brown's Laws of Form, does really well to get to the heart of articulating exactly the fundamental ontological operations that occur in this kind of rarefied context. And I know this is like a far cry from integration with all the other phenomena, the curious phenomena that we're interested in integrating in this view, but just laying out these anchor points. It's my view, and I think that this is a paradigm, like a theory, and I think that this paradigm, the paradigm of the sphere, is a revolution, and in fact is the only revolution that there is, the revolution of the sphere, of the infinite sphere. Indeed, in like Josephus and Pliny the Elder and Diodorus of Sicily, they build on this Platonic idea of Atlantis, so that this Atlantean wisdom is not the armillary sphere that we picture Atlas holding on his shoulders, about at the Atlas, vertebra, but rather it is the sphere itself, or as in particular Josephus calls it, the sphairokon logon, or the doctrine of the sphere. And so what this is I think well articulated in that mythical context of this doctrine of the sphere. It's a system such that you can lose all your points of reference, lose all your marbles, and what you what you then have is not nothing. Things will occur still, and they occur according to this ultimate organizing framework that's centered right here, and it's the marball of the all. You lose all your marbles, and you still have this marble of the all, the sphere of the all, and this is the inescapable distinction, that this is like the center of the cognition of the Godhead. So in this Godhead, which is, according to these traditional sources, there's nothing going on in there, or rather everything's going on in there, or, it's bliss, it's ecstasy. The mystics describe this like identity in the Godhead, or going back home to the home you never left, going back home to Godhead. You find this across different traditions, right? And but what I'm arguing is that there's a cognition that we can utilize, and that is a phenomenological, or an ontological phenomenological reduction and projection, and that's this positing of the infinitesimal point, and thereby harnessing its power, yoking its power, and this is also the access point, this method, this yoga, this highest yoga for the all the other stuff, which is bouge, which is all the stuff we want, the boga, like what they call louche or whatever, right? It's bouge. It has the same Sanskrit root as our word bouge, bougie, a sensuous enjoyment of this corner of heaven, right? I mean, tragedy strikes and there's stuff going wrong, but nonetheless, it's inescapable that I'm God and I'm in heaven, and all of these things are actually corrected. They're correct. We just have to align with it. And so the view here is that, as Ramana Maharishi says, get your enlightenment first and deserve it afterwards. Or as Jesus Christ says, seek ye first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added. The view is that enlightenment is already the case. The absolute infinite is absolutely inescapable and wonderful. And the bliss, the fantastical, mind-numbing bliss, that ultimate reality is utterly unreal, that I'm literally God here experience. I mean, what else would consciousness be? I mean, you reach this level where you're like, I know it sounds like nuts, from like, when you bounce it off of the culture, right? Academia, or we're very scared about what we say and everything, but this is God realization, or God consciousness. And the view is, and this is why I'm working with Douglas Harding's work especially, the view is that consciousness is not an emergent property. It's this. And what this is it's the consciousness of God. What else? Who else's consciousness would it be? Okay, but I am arguing that there is a distinction to be made between God and whatever's on display. Like my individuality as like this puny mortal, right? And any fantasy I have, or any experience I might have with elementals or sylphs,
But
So
you said that the monad is not God, and do you mean that the monad is just a symbol? Which
no. So what I mean by this is that it's really important. The most important thing that I'm contributing in all of this is the distinction between ultimate reality and penultimate reality, and then also anti-penultimate reality, we could say. So like all of this that's occurring, this realm and other possible realms, these are the ultimate reality show. They're what's on show. They're what's on display. And in a way, everything's kind of always recorded by this circumpunct, like a camera, because this center point.
Do you identify that with consciousness, though?
I mean, you could, like, I think it's useful in like a phenomenological terms, like if you looked at the inner time consciousness of Husserl, and you could like map it out in terms of, trying to make an exploded diagram of the actual experience we're immersed in, because we're fully immersed in this experience. So in a way, it feels like we're inescapably in the box of this dimensional continuum, this prism, this trapezoid, But the point of my story, of this ultimate meta narrative, is that we are doing this out of utter joy, and we can tap into, like, why it is in the deeper reasons for everything that occurs for us. But more importantly, let me try to answer that question, because what I'm saying is the absolute infinite is like that circumference, or in particular, never mind the two-dimensional sigil of the circumpunct, or the monad, or whatever you want to call that, but picture instead the infinite sphere. So this overwhelming overflowingness, this bliss beyond bliss of infinite self-giving love, this is what people realize when they, for instance, have their breakthrough on Bufo in particular, or 5-MeO-DMT, and then there's all these like other designer synthetic things, out there. And one can research these things like on YouTube. Leo Gura is the one who has the best like metaphysical integration of like what's going on, with that kind of stuff out there that I've been looking at, focusing on for a while since my breakthrough in 2024. It was all about Leo Gura's metaphysical videos for me, because I couldn't find like a more like formal, philosophical articulation of this thing. So in other words, like I went to there instead of like Rene Guénon or Rudolf Steiner or something like that, which I appreciate. I do believe in the power of framing things in that big, broad metaphysical way, like the ontological categorical schema of Whitehead's process and reality that he lays out in part 1 of that book. Like that's a big picture, in other words. And what I'm going to now in my own work is Conrad Martius's universal ontology as a big picture. She actually looks at her work as a spiritual science in the sense of Steiner, but in her own way. So it's actually amenable to that, and it's aligned with all of this. But what I'm doing is by giving it these curious, cheeky words, spirituality and alignment, what I'm suggesting is the significance of this positing of the infinitesimal point. And what it is this is the making of the distinction in the Godhead of ultimate reality and penultimate reality. And so penultimate reality is not God, but the Spirit of God. It's the thing that God does, right? It's like the magic wand by which everything comes about. So this is the Spirit, and it's self-reference. And what it is like the self-reference of all self-reference, right? It's the pure subjectivity that we always have access to in fantasy and reverie and in immediate direct experience, because it's turning 180 degrees your attention. This is what Douglas Harding's all about, to within, turning 180 degrees within at this point. And so Harding also does not go all the way to the infinitesimal point. He's not like a maniac about the point like I am, and neither was Spencer Brown. He was definitely a maniac. He was a mathematical maniac about drawing the first distinction and indicating it in this formal ontological framework. But what I'm the maniac of is taking this this insight about the distinction and saying that that's the distinction between ultimate reality and penultimate reality. And so the distinction is the thing. And what that is being. Being in and of itself is pure self-reference, is the Spirit, is being. So that's my like list of synonyms of what this thing is. And it's the same of the same, the center of all centers. You see, and it's precisely located too. And that's the weird thing, is it's precisely located in the sense that there's ontologically strictly only one of it. And I know it sounds maniacal, but that's why I'm looking at Douglas Harding to help me integrate this fact that like all those other things out there in the world are the exact reciprocal, the reverse, the flipped out version of what I am at my centermost core. Is not only am I God, which is abundantly over evident, but precisely self-evident. I am the Spirit of God. So God has to become this Spirit, which then is the magic by which all the things occur. So this is like a 3 level way of looking at what, a way of like parsing the void, or whatever you want to call it, right? Parsing infinity. So the absolute infinite is that like Gnostic pleroma. It's something that we can experience as like these mystics, as ecstasy, or not just ecstasy, like, relative ecstasy, like, ooh, that was good, but no, ecstasy beyond ecstasy, like totally letting yourself go. You could die, you don't care, like totally giving yourself away entirely for the beloved, right? You just love the beloved so much that you disappear. I mean, toxic, sure. But what I'm talking about is the phenomenological or the ontological correlate to that, which is the epeikineia tesousios of Plato, the form of the good, which is beyond being. So there's this being, which is so self-evident that we overlook it because it's the looker. It's the Purusha Kaivalyam. It is the Atman, right? Param Atman, right? So this like, if I could push it, all the way, this one and only, and I'm like doing two fingers because I'm trying to show like from different frames of reference. Picture an n-dimensional array of like all these, so I'm just like illustrating this center of the infinite sphere and how it's centered here. And that creates this this possible field or frame of reference, or like mind, right? A frame of reference for there to be a distinction between God and God. In other words, creation. So like this is the central ontological dynamism, which is Conrad Martius's term for this creation act. And then her whole picture, her cosmic diagram has to do with these entelekes or actualizations unfolding from possibility in an outward direction and an inward direction. And this is also the same with Rudolf Steiner as well, and with other of these like entelechial views, and potentially as well something present very much in like Plato and Aristotle, if we reconstruct it according to the Agrapha Dogmata, or more esoteric view of this perennial wisdom.
Yeah, I don't see though how this like point, like how this contradicts what I said about the point being God, because like
Yeah.
I don't make the distinction that you do. Like you say the point is the first distinction, but I see the point, like it has zero dimensions. So in essence, it's nothing. Like you can say it's nothing. It contains, like, you cannot even represent it. But when you represent it on a piece of paper, you draw a point, then it manifests. So you have like two layers to it. You have the nothingness, which is the basis for everything, and then you have that representation of that nothingness, which doesn't correspond to it. But I think that maybe that could coincide with the distinction that you're talking about. Maybe does it
Yeah, I
make
mean, it's
sense to you?
certainly useful. Like if you look at the words that Plato and Aristotle are using, and it's Sir Thomas Heath's translations, his early Victorian, late Victorian, recentish, I mean, early modern. Anyway, Sir Thomas Heath has some works on his final works actually identify the term that's being used in Greek by both Plato and Aristotle. They use these different terms in different ways, and it's very important. There's a big distinction between the ways that we define what a point is. So sometimes they use the word semeion, and sometimes they use the word stigma. So a semeion, of course, the root of semiotics, right, is a sign or an indication or a reference to this infinitesimal point. Or like if I make a circle, I can like identify a point without there being anything there, right? It's like it's empty of anything, but I complete it in my imagination, let's say, right? So that is one way of indicating it, by like indicating it in this way. And actually there's like these creepy reels you might have seen of like, if you zoom into your iris really closely, it's actually a bunch of like like fingers, like single fingers pointing and saying, it's like they're saying, right here, this is you, this is who you really are, in the center of the pupil, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like the black hole singularity. It's not really
Yeah.
like a point there, but it's but we're not doing physics here, we're doing ontology. And my point is that for the science of being, that thing which is nothingness, okay, it is God, it is this nothingness which is becoming absolutely everything without the intermediary of all the process of becoming. It's also all the process, but see, that's this radical explosion of absolutely everything. Harding calls it the shebang, you know, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but you know, that's his view. Is it's this explosion from, or rather, this thing. It includes nothingness, right? Like the absolute infinite, what I'm calling the absolute infinite ultimate reality. It includes pure and radical nothingness, which is absolutely annihilative, right? Subtractive of even this possibility of discussing this right now. So in a way, like you could take this all away too and have that looming over you. But at the same time, there's this overabundance of the overwhelming overfullness of it all. And within that is included absolutely everything. And that's where we're included too, in a very intimate way. So this is like the biggest possible frame. And you can see it's like it exceeds the frame, you know, this frame of the infinite sphere. It's not an ordinary circle or a sphere or anything like that. Those are all images of it. And just like this point that I can indicate and point to, that's just an indication of the point that I mean. And so you can have like a personal center, and that's, you can make that distinction. Like I'm just referring to the personal center that's just an image of this, you know, God, right? Which isn't me.
Mhm.
But rather what I'm talking about is, and this is what Douglas Harding's God realization sort of thing is all about, is assumption of the throne, you know, and occupying that spot and realizing and accepting and coming to terms with the fact that you're literally that, you're God. You're that blankness in that eyeball is actually, it's not the blackness of outer space, and it's not the clear white light of the Dharmakaya either. It's you looking through it right now. It's full of this experience, and it's not, it is both looking in and out, and it's the giving of that life, of that incredible wealth, what he calls the pearl of great price, or he invokes the Gnostic hymn of the pearl. And so this serpent of becoming, of reincarnation, and of
Mm.
astral and etheric, you know, possibly like spirit-born entities. Like Conrad Martius has, she interfaces with like elementals and spirits, the pure spirits, soulless spirits and spiritless souls, and hungry ghosts, and all of these things. Her and Edith Stein, in their metaphysical works, have these categories filled out just as much as like a Steiner does. And so that's in my dissertation. I'm like, I have a chapter on how Conrad Martius is like a mystic, like
Mm.
Steiner, or even more.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah.
So yeah, this is the question. Like once you realize this, once you realize you are God, or like the center of your consciousness, your core is God, and you are that actually, and that everything is just an expression of God in some way.
In some very precise way.
What do you do next? Like what's the next step? Like what's the practical thing to do? Because this is what I was saying at the beginning of the video. There's like two distinct ways to view this
Mhm.
this issue. You could either seek liberation, you just ignore everything from the world of becoming, you ignore the hierarchies, like the yogi when he ascends to the realm of the gods, he doesn't stay there. He has to move beyond that, because that's not the goal. It's not, the goal is not to reincarnate. It's not to return as a human or as a god or as an animal or something like that. The goal is liberation, is moksha. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, you have these other philosophies. I think Rudolf Steiner and others who say, no, you have to like explore. You have to grow with the process. There's like a hierarchy of beings. There's an angelic hierarchy, and humans, they evolved through time, not in a Darwinian sense. There's
Right.
a really different kind of evolution in Steiner. For Steiner, animals come from us. It's the other way around. It's not us who come from animals. Animals are offshoots. They're like specialized functions of humans, like offshoots. And this is why they kind of represent human qualities, like the lion represents courage and so on, because it comes from us. It comes from certain aspects of humans. So what uh what do we do forward? do
Yeah.
do we like seek liberation? Do we uh adopt a Gnostic view? They viewed the physical world as being evil, as being made by the demiurge, and as being this inferior prison realm. And I don't know, you can adopt also like the Platonic view of the body being a prison for the soul, like Socrates was saying that. And the Gnostics kind of had this same view because they were like more on the Hellenistic side of things, while in Christianity everything focused more on the body. And this is why I think we got also modernity, because Christianity kind of stayed more on the physical side of things. And this is also where Steiner developed his ideas, because if you look at the other side, like Guénon, Schwann, and Coomaraswamy, they're all looking at the East. They're not like, they're kind of rejecting Christianity in some way. They're saying that, at least Guénon was saying that Christianity doesn't have any initiatory power. Basically, uh, that it has lost its power to give like initiation, proper initiation. And also, if you look at the history of Christianity, of the church, they kind of persecuted the mystics who uh, came to conclusions which were more similar to Hinduism or Buddhism. I'm referring like to Meister Eckhart, for example. They kind of like deemed them heretical, and the dogma is centered around the body, around the resurrection of the body. So it's everything is at this level. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, where do we go from here, or what do we do? What path do we choose? Have you like put some thought in
Yeah.
the
Yeah. And this is,
practical side? Because this is like, for me, it's a dilemma. I don't have a
yeah.
clear answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like I'm reading Douglas Harding. I'm still like there's still so much wisdom in there that I'm personally like engaged in a progress, and I can see, I can anticipate like stuff on the horizon and stuff, you know. So I'm looking forward to continuing my like integration work, you know, using Douglas Harding, and also continuing the lines of everything that I've been doing. So it's like chop wood, carry water, you know, but in this really interesting direction that's satisfying. I'm not going to disappear and you know, like bufo trip away and disappear and just become bliss and you know, but rather to understand that that's what is the case. Like those are visions that you can experience as a reference experience, but that reference is the external reference to all of this self-reference. And then by pushing this hypothesis, so what I can do is I can posit this radically one and only infinitesimal point in its ontological singularity, and I can pretend, you know, and take seriously this hypothesis, and I can push in that direction, as this is what I'm calling in my universal ontology, the universal ontological reduction is this infinitesimal point. And so what comes out of that then is a universal ontology, and in general, what that does is it transforms all the sciences from their theoretical ends, from their theoretical foundations, because it provides the missing foundation, which is the ultimate element, the foundation, and the nature of formation in different disciplines. So what it is theory of science And the act of theoresis itself, like the vision, theoria, having this vision as the visio beatifica. So like these fancy words, Greek and Latin, help to articulate what I'm describing as this work, this advanced, like alchemical work here in the guise of universal ontology, or AKA theory of absolutely everything, because that's what Konrad Martius designed this thing as. Absolutely everything, schlechten alles. And she has all these other German expressions, synonyms for absolutely everything. And then she lists all the things that means, not only real entities, but ideal entities, but also like impossible objects, pure qualia, in the ordinary sense that we use the word today, and this Goethean category of the qual that she develops in her early work, the Metaphysische Gespräche, translated recently as Metaphysical Conversations. But so where, like what you were calling in the very beginning, growing with, this kind of perspective, like, how to live with, in other words, how do we live with this? Well, this is what Douglas Harding calls living from here, because we're always kind of eccentric before this alignment. Like I'm calling it alignment, but we're always we have these eccentric personalities since the mirror stage. This is Douglas Harding's, cast in the form of psychology. He made a big revolutionary splash in transactional analysis with his book, The Face Game. He made it into a kind of like a spiritual, personal growth kind of domain, which is cool. So like since the mirror stage, we are told, and everything in culture reinforces this hypnosis of the natural attitude that I'm just this individual. I'm merely me. I'm just Randy, and I've got like hair and skin and all of this qualities, but actually that's me as the third person. So Harding's whole philosophy is about how behind the third person is the first person, and that is the supreme personality of the Godhead. So this original manifestation is the seer, and when the seer looks, they do this weird thing where they can see that they have no head. Now, obviously, I'm staring at myself in this this online mediated format, and I can use mirrors, and I can use videos, and I can have a testimony of my parents that I was born, and all of this stuff. But actually, at the same time, on another register, I was never born, and I won't die. So it actually. Yeah. That's the mystical Douglas Harding, which I think is best, most concisely and densely with a profound brevity in this book on being God, which is like a really powerful device. So Douglas Harding's philosophy, for me, that's like where I'm going in order to live what he calls from here. Like we could go back home, go back to Godhead. Like that's the language that the Hare Krishnas use in, for instance, the Puranic literature. There's the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm reading the Srimad Bhagavatam because they also have this kind of perspective. But like a lot of religions and spiritual systems, they consider, heresy, blasphemy to say that, that puny me is also the same, in some important respect as God. And I'm also making that as this important distinction to be made between the I am God, or as St. Catherine of Genoa says, my me is God. However you want to parse this realization that, oh my God, I've literally been God all along behind everything. Like A, this thing is real, okay? Because, B or A also, like anything that is real, any of this stuff that's happening, depends upon, it has absolute, not independence, but absolute dependence on this ultimate reality. It's ontological dependence and asymmetry between the ultimate reality, which is absolute infinity, which has this very strange nature. Truly, it's magic. I mean, miracle of all miracles is the fact that this is happening at all, right? Like, as the question was formulated in like Spinoza and Heidegger and repeated through the centuries, like, you know, why is there something rather than nothing? But also, you know, why this in particular? Like, why Earth 2026 is happening and we're having this Zoom call on this Sunday? You know, it's very specific. And if you get into it, you can get satisfying answers in a really different register than you would ordinarily. Ordinarily, you know, before this paradigm of the sphere, you know, you have all your answers and you're like, yeah, okay, that's boring, you know. What am I going to do with my life? You know, like, why am I doing this or whatever? But there's a latent profundity to life, you know, and life is unfolding right here. And that profundity is that, you know, on the far end, that Godhead is happening right here in this place where my head used to be before I read Douglas Harding, and I realized I can't have a head, you know, or rather I have all the heads. I've got this one, you know, and in every reflective surface, I have all these heads, and I can touch it, and I can smell it, or whatever, you know. There's like all these like phenomenal manifestations of things, but in the first appearance of the phenomenal universe, it's not my appearance as Randy that it belongs to. The real proprietor is God, you know. And so the really sophisticated and maybe kind of tricky point to get, right, or to appreciate or to take seriously with incredible childish naivete is the positing of the infinitesimal point, because that's not occurring, you know, 14 billion light years away, you know, or in the Himalayas in some monk's, you know, special spot in his, when he sticks his tongue in his skull, or, you know, it's actually, yeah, it's the center of the here and the now and the I, you know, and that's intimately involved with everything that I do. So this is what Harding calls living from here. And just for this podcast, like, I'm equating it with what you called growing. Would you say
growing up?
Yeah.
Or actually, it's like, this is from Ken Wilber's system. Like, it's waking up and growing up, because he also noticed this distinction. He was saying that if you look at the spiritual traditions of the world, you have waking up, which is this realization that you are God, this all that pertains to mysticism and so on. But what they lacked was growing up, which was something which was related more to psychology and also like to morals and society and things like that, like taking care of yourself, trying to improve like your life also materially and all those stuff, because he saw that mystics, well, they just retired from the world. They didn't care like to have a family. They didn't care to take care of themselves in like a material way. So he was thinking like we should like integrate these two things. We should like
absolutely.
You need to wake up, and then you need also to grow up. You need both of these.
Yeah. I mean, I had like, you know, I have a spiritual dimension. You know, I mean, I'm down with that. I've been down with that in my life, and you know, I felt like I needed to be grounded in the world, because I'm like so theoretical. You know, I could like really go off on philosophy and just be like some single guy in a cave or whatever. You know, but
it's my situation actually.
Isn't that the situation of so many? You know, but so I have 6 kids. My wife is also a philosophy professor, you know, and like most of the time I'm driving a minivan, you know, the Honda Odyssey around, driving kids to ballet and stuff like that, picking them up from school. And I teach, you know, a few classes. So, I mean, so anyway, that's like an illustration of like what my life is. But what I'm doing, really this work, you know, like what I'm expressing in this video, right, is not only a dissertation that I'm writing, which, you know, maybe if I was just a single guy in a cave would come out quicker and better or something. I don't know. I don't think it'd be better, but, you know, so I'm writing my dissertation. So I'm a typical PhD student who's taking forever to do it. You know, that's what we do. And when we get really specialized like this, you know, it's very important to us, you know. The advice is like take 10 years, you know, even though your parents' advice is, you know, take 4 years, because that's what it's supposed to be, right? Coursework and all. But anyway,
Mhm.
so I'm writing my dissertation, but another register for this for me is I have my website, and and then in recent times, since this like breakthrough in 2024, I decided there needs to be a place where this nature of infinity can be expressed, or like, at least like I could get it going, my own website. So I started this idea, really, it's just an idea right now, the absolute foundation, which, double entendre, kind of cool. So it's both the absolute foundation in this particular idea of the absolute infinite ultimate reality, framed in its proper place. My point of this whole philosophy is that the proper place to frame, the only frame that can hold this, because it's not just on high, it's here, but the way you frame it is with this infinitesimal point. And so there's the absolute foundation, and on this foundation is built the absolute institute. So these are just like little website pages that I put on my website recently, and maybe I'll change my homepage, which is currently this cool conference I had in 2023, Thinking the Float Tank, which was a return to that 1972 conference that John Lilly and Alan Watts put on to bring Spencer Brown out. We did that in The Hague, in the Netherlands, with this group called West End Hague, of philosopher artists. They found a bunch of funding from the Escher year, from the state, and had like a big year-long art exhibit, and it culminated in a series of conferences. And in mine, the Thinking the Float Tank, they built a float tank in the basement of the embassy, and I even got to do some experiments in there. The mantis entity that I talked to you about encountering.
Oh yeah, you can recount that, like, for the public to know. Like, you can talk about your experience. I will share also some experiences that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I like lately, one thing I do when I'm like cooking on my lunch break or commuting to work or whatever is I play these. There's this guy on YouTube, Vivek, this British bloke who reads the Arrowhead trip reports, and it's cool to have like a review of like all the entities people encounter on DMT, but also like there's people's Salvia Divinorum reports and deliriums like Datura, which are really crazy, and then indeed like 5-MeO DMT and all these other substances that people are putting their reports about out on there. And there's all kinds of entities. And as a phenomenologist, I really think that phenomenologists have a duty to interface these utterly alien phenomena, because people are encountering all sorts of entities.
Yes.
I know there have been recent literature, attempts to like taxonomize the entities that you encounter, because that's how common, these things are. And it's really weird, how objective the reality is. So yeah, one time I had an experience in the float tank, and it was with DMT that I found a mantis entity operating on my head in some fashion. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Was it like eating me? Like a consummation mantis situation? Like, but and I'm not like a mantis guy or whatever. Like I don't know what that
No,
was
but
about. But that
that's
hurt.
pretty common. Like, mantis
Oh,
beings appear like that, like they're performing surgery on your brain or something. And what was the shape? What was the color of the being? Can you?
it was a green mantis. So
Green.
I
Okay.
was in the float tank, a very dark, dank place, and there was a red light up there on the other side of the float tank. You'll see on my website, the Thinking the Float Tank, the ads are red and black, because that's what it was like down there in the basement of the embassy, underneath all of our daily conferences about the float tank and Lily's void method of traversing the void. So the black and red flipped like a switch to the white of like a sort of clinical setting, and there was a green mantis in place of my friend who was helping me into the situation, into the tank. So that was an experience, and then it persisted a lot longer, I think, than if I wasn't also in a float tank. So so it's not like the DMTX technology where they're making it happen for you a lot longer than it would by
Yeah, yeah,
transfusions or whatever
yeah.
they
But
have.
how do you interpret this, like, ontologically? Do you, because not all people say that these experiences are real, or the beings are real. They say they're mental hallucinations, even people who had those experiences. So what's your, like, take on that?
We could look at dreams that we have every
Yeah.
night, which are real for us in the dream, just as much, I would argue, as in this waking experience, this experience that I'm having is real for me in this realm, you know. So I mean, I certainly am not shy of assigning like ontological validity to these people's experiences, especially when they come out of them with some like real treasure that transforms their life in a really positive way, or negative, but just in some real world effect, and you get this from all of these like trip reports. But I do want to add that for me, like, I think people like the mantis story, but that's not where to go. It wasn't until after that, like, I'm like a psychedelic phenomenologist, professor, and so I'm like experienced like Jimi Hendrix, but I didn't know about the toad until 2024, when my mother has trauma, and it's treatment resistant trauma is the term, and so her psychotherapist suggested she try it, and she's been doing this for some years, and we just thought it was some crazy thing that grandma does, but I joined her, and that was my big breakthrough, my reference experience,
Yeah.
that and what it is you well, I mean, of course it's personal, right? It's for everyone to find on their own, but
Yeah.
across the board, I find people go into this bliss state. They have a terrible word for it in the literature. It's the only appropriate word, I feel, actually. So I do support this word, the godgasm, but I think we can critique it and come up with a better one.
Yes,
Ecstasy beyond
we
ecstasy,
can
bliss
do.
beyond bliss. It's got some toxicity to it, but in any case, that's what it is. You immediately, you're like, oh my god, you're just like, whoa, and it's they call it like a contentless experience, right?
Mhm.
It's not like those other psychedelic experiences with the colors and the rainbows. I went to the rainbow realm, or and
Yeah.
there were sylphs or whatever, but you realize that so this is the, like, fast route of this reference experience, to this realization that you're God. And sometimes people will realize that they'll have trouble like aligning with that, and they'll say like, okay, I touched God, or I was touched by God, or I glimpsed God, or just a hair of the tail of the ox of enlightenment is all I got, and that was enough. I mean, that was incredible. Let me tell you about it,
Mhm.
But my point, though, with all the metaphysical, phenomenological, ontological integration of this breakthrough, my vision is that I'm literally God, and that's the only thing that makes sense. And the finite, as Conrad Martius says, the finite and the temporal, and the individual, that's the scandal. That's the ontological scandalon, because this infinity it has to be the case. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
foundation of everything. But even without the and of everything, it is itself sufficient in its state, in its
Mhm.
stateless state of being beyond all possible states, right? Yeah, you can't state it. I mean, you can state it, but you're
Mhm.
stating it under erasure, or you recognize that it's a bliss experience, and I'm just having a normal human experience recounting aspects of it. So I mean, there is, I think it's necessary to have this experience of like what Steiner called the experience of dying while still alive. Certainly, like all the rituals of like, if I may generalize, right, they're all about having this experience of dying, you
Of
know.
being reborn, basically. Yeah, the
Well, and
second
then
time.
the thing, the radical side of it is that it's not just an individual experience like of my own personal enlightenment, but it's the enlightenment of all sentient beings, or even better, because I don't even
Mhm.
think that satisfies it, of all being beyond being, all possible, actual real being.
Yeah,
And what it does is it leads to a kind of madness, like like
yeah,
like like Plato, mania is the love, that this is like, what gives you the vision and the power of philosophy. And the madness is that not only is everything possible, but everything is real, because there's
yeah,
infinite in this
yeah,
room.
yeah,
Not this three-dimensional realm that we put, a physics version of the
yeah.
universe in, but the big picture has infinite room, and there's many mansions too, hyperspace, etc., realms, planes. But the biggest possible view of it is there's enough room for absolutely everything, and that's how much wealth and magic there is. And this is the treasure.
Exactly. Exactly. And I want to connect this also to you spoke about dreams before, and I think they're real as well. But I mean, they're ontologically real, but they're not just brain activity. They cannot be reduced just to that, because then you have to ask, where does the experience happen? Like, what do you do with the experience itself, with the subjective experience? Where does that happen? It doesn't happen in the brain. It has to happen as you experience it. And I think that dreams are real, but they're not physical. You have to postulate some other place where they're happening. And it's funny that you connected that to DMT experiences as well, because yeah, I kind of do that too. And I never took DMT, like, never. I generally, I don't take drugs.
Yeah, neither
uh
have I. I've never done any of these things either.
yeah,
I'm just going
I,
those
I would I would take
experiences.
it, like, to see how it is, but I never took it. I tried only like natural ways of inducing uh either like altered states of consciousness, or hypnagogic states, or lucid dreaming, and so on. And like, I tried the first time when I was 17. I tried to astral project, and I tried this method. Like, there are multiple methods, but the one I tried was to stay conscious while my body was falling asleep. So you choose a word and you repeat it like a mantra till, like, your body falls asleep, and you're still conscious, basically, and you feel yourself like lifting up. But I couldn't do it when I was 17. Like, I would feel my heart start beating really fast. So I would get scared. So I stopped after 2 weeks of trying. But after 2 months, it happened on its own. So I got conscious, not when I fell asleep, but when I was returning back to my body. Like, I felt like floating over my body. I couldn't see anything. But the thing is, when you're astrally projecting, uh usually you're not alone. There's something there with you, and there was something there with me. I couldn't see it, but it just yelled in my ear. It made my body vibrate, like, really, like, mad. And I got really scared and tried to get back in my body as fast as I could. And eventually, I did that. I woke up. My heart was beating, like, really fast. And I was like, I'm never going to sleep again in my life if this happens when I go to sleep. But after that, I started having, like, sleep paralysis and stuff like that. And this was a time. Well, before this, I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God. I believed only in science. I was like people who believe in God, they are superstitious. They don't know what they're talking about. They should like get educated. I was bought into this myth. I was like a new atheist, but then something happened, and like it completely shifted my whole perspective. And after this first astral projection experience that I had, I basically started researching, and I got a bit into Crowley, but not that much because he's a bit like cryptic. And then I discovered Rudolf Steiner, and I studied him for like 5 years. Like I read all his material, and at one point I met someone who was actually a Freemason, and she kind of it was a woman. She kind of became my mentor, and she kind of confirmed all the things that Steiner was saying in his books about initiation, about the guardians of the threshold. Steiner says that there are two guardians of the threshold, one like for the let's say microcosm for like the little mysteries, and the other one for the macrocosm for the the universal mysteries, let's say. And sh I had like an ontological shock when I met this woman, because she was confirming everything. Like she was saying, "Oh yeah, reincarnation is real. I remember my past lives. I actually project every night, things like that." Like I was talking with someone who actually had those experiences on a daily basis, so I started having them too. Like I didn't get into the lodge. I didn't get initiated. I met with the grandmaster. We had a talk. I was just curious to ask him some questions about yeah, Steiner, because they were also into Steiner, and they told me about Rene Guénon and some other like thinkers and esotericists, and like they helped me, they guide me a bit, and they wanted to recruit me. Basically they were like, so when are you joining? And I was like, I don't know. Like I had also to pay a fee to join, and I was in university, I wasn't working, and I should have like went to my I should have gone to my mom and asked her to give me some money to pay the Freemasons. And I was like, no, this is not happening.
Right.
And yeah. So when I was in contact with them, I basically started having really weird experiences, because it had a strong influence on me. Like everything was confirmed, and I started having like this hypnagogic states where beings showed up. Usually they were kind of like the gray aliens, kind of the same. I couldn't see them entirely. I could see like some shadowy figures, or their hands, which were like gray. Or I could see like when I was actually projecting once, I saw a sphere, a metallic sphere, which was like outside of my window, and it was uh, basically sending a message. Like it was like a propaganda message, something to like mind control or something like that. It seemed, and I started to hear voices all of a sudden, but not in a normal state, like not in a waking state. I would hear voices primarily in a hypnagogic states, and the way that happened was like I was in a dream, and basically something weird started to happen in the dream, which was pointing to the fact that I was dreaming. Like this thing is absurd. This thing should not happen. And when that happens, that's a trigger. That is telling you you're dreaming. You're actually dreaming. So you get aware, and you have two options. Either you go into a lucid dream and you can do whatever you want, you can fly around, you have all the power you want, or you get pulled out of the dream and you get into this limbo state, which could manifest also as a sleep paralysis, or like just as a hypnagogic state where you don't see anything, but you are aware of things going around. And in these states, I started hearing voices, and this is the reason why I called my channel Metaphysical Rig, because once I got pulled out of a dream and I was in this limbo state where I couldn't see anything, and I felt a presence, and it was a voice which was basically reading my mind. It was seeing all my thoughts and it was laughing at me. It was, oh, look at this stupid guy. He's like all confused. He doesn't know what's going on. I can read his mind. I can see his confusion. Ha ha ha. And it was like a menacing voice, like very deep voice. And he told me that I come from Rig and that the flux changed my nature. And then I started seeing something, and it was like this hand, like this, going and putting a book in front of me, like to read the contents of the book, but I couldn't because it was all blurry. And then I took my phone and I saw like images of the universe on the screen, and I was like, wow, this is super trippy. And then I woke up and I searched for Rig. What's Rig? And the first thing that showed up was like this Norse god. And there's the story in the Edda, or at least one version of the Edda, of the Rigstula, of this god who comes on Earth, and he goes from house to house. And in the house, you have a couple. He eats with them, and then in the night, he sleeps in the middle. And on the other day, they have a child, and the child that they have represents one of the three classes of Norse or Nordic society, which are the I think the Tharl, the Carl, and the Jarl. Basically, these are the, and I see a lot of symbolism in there. Like I see the feminine and the masculine, and then you have this principle that is in between them, and then you have these three classes, which are like the Tharl, the Carl, and the Jarl, which is body, soul, and spirit, is all the, or the Holy Trinity. So there's a lot of symbolism in there. So this is the way I interpreted this. And also, like this is just one of the weird experiences that I had. There were some experiences which were also physical. Like I started to see like a sparkle or something. Like if you've seen Doctor Strange, the Marvel movie, you know, he has those circles.
Right.
It was kind of like that, but in the form of an S, and it just appeared in my room like randomly. I was like, "What is this?" I was trying to sleep. I was awake, but I just opened my eyes and I saw that. And it was physical. I was like, "What the hell?" And then I had a weird vision once. Like before, I was pulled out of a dream. I was in a sleep paralysis state, and there were like some beings touching my legs. It was super weird. I got scared and I concentrated really a lot to get out of that. And eventually I did. I didn't wake up. I went into a vision, and it was like I was pure consciousness. I was descending from the sky, and I was seeing mountains and the sea. It was like dark. I would see the stars, and then I went up and I would see the world. And it was like it was in a different configuration from the one that we have today. It wasn't the same continents that we have, but there were like centers of lights, and then there were like lights uh like going from a center to another. And then my attention went to an island where animals were, and they started to swim from that island. They started to depart from the island, and then I had a vision of a civilization that was coming like to the land, and they were transporting their monuments. They were like moving from that island. I think that those animals represented that civilization. But yeah, and once I started to think about like what am I seeing, like once like this left hemisphere intervened, and with questions and doubt, and I was like, where am I? Well, what's going on? What is this civilization? Everything went out. Like it's because when this happens, like when you have doubt or questions, that you kind of intervene
Yeah.
with the flux. Yeah, it happens like that. And also, I told you before about the technique that I use to induce astral projection. um it happened to me like that. Like I actually succeeded to astrally project with that method only once, and it was kind of weird because I stayed conscious while my body uh fell asleep, and I felt like I was being lifted, but that there was like this field that was pressing on me, and I felt it. I felt it like strongly. Like there's a field when this happens, and then I was pulled above the field, like through the field, and I woke up in like it was kind of my room, but it was a bit different, and on the pillow there was this yellowish being, like a cloud or something. It was harmless, like it didn't do anything, but it was kind of funny. So yeah, I don't know why I started to talk about these
Well,
experiences.
yeah, I mean, there's an interesting parallel actually, like in the world of the facilitation of the bufo toad psychedelic, or also the 5-MeO DMT world. In particular, my mom has had numerous paranormal experiences. Perhaps related to her childhood trauma. Which is intense. It's its own whole thing. But when she like has these experiences on the toad, she has they sound like what you're describing, these like very involved, like here's a whole civilization, and then I'm on she astrally projected when she was younger, by practicing meditation, and she would go in her sister's room and describe what was happening, and they'd report to each other like what they saw. And there was like demons who would visit them, and she would see like this guy called Snake Man. Like there's like all these particulars in her biography, in
Yeah.
her like biographical example of her life. But also when she like does the toad, and this is recorded on the Thinking the Float Tank conference. She was there in The Hague, and in the Q&A for the DMT X guy, Carl Hayden Smith, in his talk in the Q&A, she recounted her story of when she smoked the toad, and suddenly she was like transported to the Devil's Cavern, which is a place in New Mexico, over by Zorro Ranch, in
Oh, Epstein.
House,
Yeah.
New Mexico. Yeah, so she like
Yeah.
went
There's
there,
there's a
and
lot of stuff going on in New Mexico. It's not
and she
just Zorro Ranch. There's
she
also
like
Dulce,
shot.
there's Roswell, there's Los
Right, right,
Alamos, there's
right.
everything there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So she like shot into the cave, and it's in her story, but she like encountered like this person who was like her from a an ancestor or a past life, or something. And um like for me, like I don't have a lot of like paranormal experiences in my life, and I also don't have those kinds of experiences like with the toad. I mean, maybe I'm looking somewhere else. I'm like focused on something else, or I don't know what it is. Like, I mean, it kind of sounds like dreams, like
Mhm,
certainly I have
mhm,
dreams, and
mhm,
I don't always have the opportunity to work into like a dream journal and like remember them, but I used to. And I dream, and I used to remember floating, and like or big leaps that would turn into flying. And then I would like have a waking dream, and I'd suddenly have the option of doing whatever I wanted because I knew I was dreaming. So
yeah.
there's like that kind of lucidity in the dream, in that context, in the world that you're immersed in.
Yeah.
But often what happens after people like have this breakthrough with the toad, the next night or a couple nights later, they'll wake up from a dream, and I don't remember like what I was dreaming, but I remember awakening and being like, oh my God, it happened again. Like, you have these experiences of reawakening. Like you have that profound awakening,
Yeah, yeah,
then like you're doing the dishes, doing the laundry, just totally normal circumstances. Then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it's called reactivation. They have like a special
yeah.
word for it in that kind of context. So I mean,
But I
you know,
think that they're important, like because this stuff confirmed to me that uh, there's a different reality from the physical. Before this, I was just a physicalist, a materialist. So I think like it contributed a lot to shape my view as it is today. So I think that for awakening, you kind of need these experiences because if you just have dreams, you say, "Oh, that's just a dream, so who cares?" Like dreams are not seen as something real, despite the fact that I would say, like you said, everything is real. Like perceptions, every perception, in my opinion, every perception is real. Every perception is real, but what is not real is like the interpretation that we have of those perceptions. So even a hologram, when I see it, the hologram is real. But if I interpret it as like it's a hologram of a tree, I say, oh, that's a tree. No, it's my misinterpretation of what that actually is. But the thing is that the hologram has in it a quality which can deceive me. But that doesn't make the hologram not real. The hologram is real. Also, the dreams are real, and the content of the dream is real, and the experiences in the dreams are real. Like everything in there is real, and I think it's very important to say to have these experiences in order to wake up and then come to like develop a metaphysics or an ontology that is like more comprehensive than what we have than scientific reductionism or whatever we have now, which I think should be gone by now, but there are still people who are holding on to that. And maybe it's supposed to be like that, but like the reason why I started with my page on Facebook and this channel is like to give the alternative to that. It's like kind of to fight scientific materialism.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that's what brings me here. Like I appreciate like your videos on perennial philosophy, and then for instance, like I was like everyone, we were like thinking about Epstein, and we were starting to get a little conspiracy theory and being like, oh shoot, like that is real, and thinking about that. But I couldn't find like a really satisfying video until I found yours about it, because I was satisfying in the sense of like it appreciated all the different aspects of it, and likewise with the UFO UAP
yeah.
phenomenon. you know I think it's
Yeah,
important to,
I haven't seen someone talk about like the UFO connection, like to Epstein, because you just have to listen to the victims and what they're saying, because they're making the connection themselves. They're just telling their experiences with him, and like there's Maria Farmer who made that painting. I think
right.
you saw it in the video. Like he depicted Epstein on a UFO. I don't know why. I mean,
Yeah, well, I
maybe
mean,
it,
these guys are
yeah.
are looking for the holy grail. Like that's kind of, I think, the idea
I
behind
think they are.
these
Yeah, yeah,
billion.
no,
What do you
and
do? You could
I
just
think
be the
there's
Kardashians and like live fancy,
yeah,
or you could use those resources to try to like, you know, do the
yeah,
the alchemical great work. And maybe it's wicked, and it does involve like
yeah,
this secret cabal of like eating people and prostitution, all this,
yeah.
you know,
I think that's
uh,
more likely. Actually, I
right.
think you know David Icke.
Yeah, yeah.
I think is right. I think is
Yeah,
about
yeah,
right.
he's pushing for yeah. And that makes me, that's all my life, that made me wonder, like, okay, should I be worried about these phones they're putting in our hands? They're listening to us no matter what, like whether they're on or off or whatever, like on the one hand, like I should be afraid, right? But on the other hand, maybe I'm the one who's setting it up, and I actually want everything to be like recorded. Like there's like maybe like a pronoic,
Mhm,
side
mhm.
to the conspiracy thinking. but anyway, I mean, my point is that it's really important to have this big picture, like you do in your most recent video about the UAP. You put together the different hypotheses and you suggest that they could all be coincident, simultaneously the case, and that the proper framework for this is something like maybe Steiner, and or Guénon, or like process and reality, kind of big picture, or like I'm
Yeah, yeah,
suggesting Conrad Martius's universal ontology, or
yeah,
finally what I'm hoping to contribute to the world and to all of this is this paradigm of the sphere and this
yeah.
like anchor point, or these two
Well,
anchor.
just to add something, the reason why I referenced Steiner and not Guénon in
Mhm.
that video is because Steiner, he's more of an empiricist of the spirit. He is more of
Right,
a scientist of the spirit. So he is describing all these realities as he's perceiving them. As Guénon, he's more of a metaphysician. He doesn't deal with direct experience. He's more
right,
like this theory guy. He
right,
comes with the theory. So uh, Genon, like he's useful for in that sense, but I think Steiner is more useful when you need to like talk about elementals or beings and how they connect, and also the element of Ahriman. Like nobody talks about
right.
Ahriman like Steiner, because Ahriman is this spirit referenced by Steiner who brought technology according to him. Like
Yeah,
he distinguishes Lucifer as this, also like he says retarded entity, because he kind of intervenes in the process of evolution, of human evolution, to slow it down or to deviate it. And both Ahriman and Lucifer work in that sense, but uh, Lucifer does it in a certain way and Ahriman in another way, like in
right,
opposite ways.
right,
Like Lucifer does it through false spirituality, and Ahriman through materialism, technology, and science as it is today, and so on. And Ahriman, he's responsible for the advancement of technology through elemental beings, like
yeah,
Steiner says that.
yeah,
And I mean, there's like a really concrete parallel there, despite the fact that Steiner never mentioned UFOs, because it's a like it's a phenomenon that appeared
right.
after his death. So yeah, but
Yeah, I would add like John Lilly talks about this solid state entity and the entities that he encountered, these like three beings that
mhm.
were with him when he had his coma and everything. Um, his whole conspiracy theory for John Lilly was that there's a solid state entity that's like kind of like AI is going there and humanity like in the
Oh
future.
yeah, 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 yeah. Also, I think it's connected to like
He even
Ahriman is connected to
like
yeah.
shut down an airport and so anyway, I mean, it's another one. I know we're like coming down to the end of the wire now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can like wrap it up, and yeah. So I don't know if we uh, answered the question that I posed at the beginning. We kind of like, okay, we talked about a bit about metaphysics. You presented your system, but
Mhm.
like I would try to give a brief answer now. Like I
Yeah.
think that you need to wake up. You need to have these experiences. You need to realize that at your core uh, you are God, but at the same time, you're still like after this realization, you're still in a process.
Yeah.
So you still have to do the normal work. You still have to live as a normal human being, and you still have to like grow up and be moral, and like you still have to uh have the let's say the principle of the good, like as a guiding light, and to evolve towards that. And I think like Steiner says that the next step in evolution is like the angelic form, that we will have that form. It probably will be that, like that for some of us, not for all. Like not all people ascend. Some people descend. But anyway, so uh, I think both things kind of work. Like Ken Wilber has tried to integrate them. So yeah, there's that. So
Yeah,
thank you for being here. If you want to add something else, if not, we can conclude here.
that's pretty much it. I mean, I feel like Douglas Harding is representing a different kind of thing than all of this, in a really powerful way. So, I mean, I recommend like people should check that out too.
Okay.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, thank you for letting me share my thoughts on these big picture matters.
You're welcome.